we're not going to shoot ourselves in the foot pretending we have expertise in an area that we don't. We have expertise in enough areas.
It is not always about winning. It is about having a winning mindset. And you can't win if you don't practice and show up and put your best effort.
Welcome to the DesignRush Podcast. I'm your host, Kia Johnson. Today, I'm joined by Kellie, Pean, and Sophie Jacoel, the co-founders of Brand New, a collective. They run a culture-first creative agency built on real relationships and work that actually connects. Kellie and Sophie know what it takes to grow without burning out and without losing your people, your purpose, or your edge. They've led teams, built brands, and figured out how to scale without selling out. Whether you're building a creative team, growing an agency, or just trying to lead with more clarity this year, this episode is packed with hard-won insights you don't want to miss. Catch the full conversation on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify. Want to be featured? Email us at spotlight@designrush.com. Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe for more insights from the leaders shaping the future of brand and marketing. Hi, Sophie. Hi, Kellie. Welcome to the DesignRush Podcast. It's wonderful having you here with us on the show today. I want to start out with my first question, just touching base and finding out from you. In your experience, and this goes to both of you, in your experience, where does the tension of agency growth show up most clearly, like in the quality of work? Would you say it's the talent that you attract, or would you say that it's actually how clients perceive your value?
I think for us, we launched our agency in 2018 and, have continued to grow year over year. But with that growth, I think tension shows up in a variety of ways. And a lot of that is kind of driven by perception, right? We are a smaller team, but we are competing and against, some of the biggest industry giants. So sometimes the perception of smaller teams might be a bit counter to what those traditional agency paradigms are. So for us, we take a lot of pride in building really great partnership, building collaboration, developing long-standing relationships with our agency partners and client partners so that perception is shifting. And I think we've done that very well over the past few years where we've slowly started to change what those traditional agency norms are.
Yeah, I think we're very conscious, to Kellie's point, about how we grow, and we monitor all those things. We monitor client retention, we monitor employee retention and satisfaction. And I think, one of the things that we keep an eye on is making sure that as we grow, we're growing with people that share the same core mindset of the importance of the work and culture and how that affects our work.
I'm actually curious then. I mean, if you had to actually strip down your agency down to one defining characteristic that cannot be sacrificed as you grow, what would you say that is?
I think it's a cultural obsession. It is really an obsession with digging into the nuance of people, subcultures, communities that make us who we are and connect us. You can have a brand that has any product. You can have an agency who is, focused on digital or social, experiential, creative. But when you really strip it down, we are trying to build brands that are connecting with consumers and human emotion. And in order to do that effectively, you really have to take the time to sit in that and make sure that you're reflecting that, both in how your agency is structured, the people that are representative of you in the agency, how we partner, how we investigate the world around us. And that really leads to beautiful work because it's never the same.
I think it's the intention. Our intention remains the same, no matter what brief we're working on. And our intention is always to ensure that we're just authentically connecting with people, to what brands come to us for.
Here at DesignRush, we've actually been tracking how AI and automation are reshaping agency execution. So, obviously speed and scale, it takes priority. But the question then is, how do you protect space for original thinking and culturally intelligent storytelling?
It's an exciting time. I think as an elder millennial 80s baby, I kind of grew up with both sides, right? Without any technology, the advance of technology, the tech boom in the 2000s. And it's been interesting to see the trajectory of just innovation. And I think there's space, but there's also pause and there's caution. And that's probably my pre-tech boom, generation coming out of me. Like, let's wait, let's ask some questions here. But I think there's a measured way to approach this, right? There are obviously amazing, opportunities for us to be more operationally efficient and that could be something as simple as note-taking on a Zoom call, right? It can really help us to think more strategically and how we're structuring things. I think there's an element of creative support, that AI and automation can bring. However, I just talked about our importance and belief in cultural mastery, and that is like humanity over everything. That's the nuance of my personal lived experience that a robot is not going to get me. And I've seen all the movies, I roboted myself out. Listen, we've seen the sci-fi, we get it. And so there's an excitement about it, but being responsible and really thinking about, how it can help us, but not hinder our human approach to things, right? And that's what makes the work so special, our ability to connect on a human level. And so I think it's about moderation. I think, we're still in a hugely exploratory phase right now. And as long as we have some checks and balances around that, as we have, with a ton of, technological advances, we can use it in the way that we need to. But I think it's, it's still in its early nascent stages. So we'll see. But at the end of the day, I really strongly believe that the ability to connect with our teams, our consumers, our partners on a human level, and really being able to unlock certain types of expertise that you can't really replicate is the way to go. And it's funny, I was actually just talking to our payroll processor for some benefits related thing. As a co-founder, you're doing like client work. Sometimes I'm like, a HR benefit specialist. I wear many hats. But it was funny because the person I was speaking to was plugging something into an AI tool. And it just so happened that the response they gave me did not seem correct. Like the math wasn't mathing. So I took my phone, I did a quick calculation, and I say to the guy, I was like, yeah, this seems off by $200. And he checks it, apologizes on behalf of himself and AI, and says that it was wrong. And this is what I'm saying, humanity over everything. Because it's like you don't want to blindly just accept something without doing the due diligence, right? So how do we maintain that tension, that balance?
I think also AI's got its place. And I just feel also, because you're just speaking to the part where you're speaking about, human first, is that there's certain spaces where one has to be very, very, very careful with AI and overly cautious, which is just as the one that you mentioned.
Yeah, look, I don't know. It's moving so fast, the landscape. I don't know what it's going to look like in 5-10 years. But right now, I see AI as a tool. And you can use tools effectively, and there's wrong ways to use tools. And it's like any other tool that's come up. And I think we have a tendency to... And look, this is a tool unlike we've ever seen before. But we've had project management tools, the rise of graphic design, and the industry, was nervous about change, because you're always nervous about change. But I think, the fact that we've been having these conversations, as long as people continue to have these conversations, hopefully we can get as many benefits out of AI as possible. And we can stay clear of some of the dangers. But for right now, I'm yet to see AI do what I see my human teams do.
Kellie said moderation, and for yourself, you're saying, tools as well. So it definitely is about that and finding that balance. Do you think actually then that, this increased prioritization of speed and data, just to kind of like tie in with AI a little bit, actually compromises long-term brand equity that agencies are supposed to build? Do you foresee that maybe developing into that space? Yeah.
Well, look, I think people come to us specifically for a certain thing. And to Kellie's point, it's about humanity, and it's about culture, and it's about connection and authenticity. So when they're coming to us for something that today AI has not been able to achieve. So we're not in competition with people who are doing, quick fire, high volume content where AI really is changing the game. And is putting people out of jobs, but that's just not frankly, what we do. So, to us, it's not as scary as it is to some sort of agencies that do different types of work.
What would you say then is one so-called trend that you think is overblown, and what's one that agency leaders should be paying more attention to, just from your experience?
I used to work exclusively on creative AORs. And now, as you mentioned, they're fewer and further between. But I don't think that's necessarily an issue for us. I think, especially as a boutique, nimble agency who can be more flexible than a huge holding company, I think for us, that's actually a huge opportunity. And more indie shops are finding that project-based is giving us an advantage over, those larger, we will not name, holding companies, because we can just compete. We can compete in a way that they just can't. So for us, that's a trend that is overblown, because it's a opportunity for us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, being a boutique style agency does have a lot of benefits as well. I keep seeing the word niche, coming to the front, and it also helps you. It's just that personalization, I'm sure, that you feel more with your clients, that you're able to really travel the journey with them, as opposed to just being a vendor, actually being a partner. Yeah.
I think, my background is actually on the brand side. So I came from a brand marketing background for a number of years. And I think when we talk about niche and what our offering is, it's, being able to have a team that is very representative of different journeys. Everyone that works at Brand New, a collective, is not, a trajectory of just agency traditionalists. Like, that's not what it is. It's really a hybrid of different experiences and backgrounds and workplaces and industries. I think when we think about trends, though, and putting my brand hat on, a lot of brands want to chase trends because the trends are showing where consumer behavior is sometimes, right? Like, that's where the engagement is happening. And they're quick to be like, oh gosh, we got to get on TikTok now. Because when TikTok came out and that was big, it's like, we got to get on TikTok. Or even like when Snapchat first came out, right? You've got all of these different kind of platforms that are constantly coming to the bubble in the forefront. So AI is one of those. And I think where our challenge is with, as an agency and a partner to the brands, is to really sit with the brands and pause and think about, what are we trying to achieve? What does the landscape look like? What does success look like for us here? Do we know enough before we go in? We work with a lot of highly regulated industries that don't allow us to just go on certain platforms because they're not age gated. For example, we work in the spirits industry. We can't work on platforms that don't have 71% plus 21 and up audiences. So financial services, same thing. Cannabis, similar. So we have to really understand the landscape before we are moving. And part of our job is to sit with our brand teams and challenge and partner with them to think through those things as we're developing plans and programs and how we're investing A&P dollars. And even we might say, there is something that just came up. Let's use something that might be opportunistic funds to dabble in this a little bit to test it. But let's not put all our eggs here right now because we're not really sure what this looks like, right? So I think going back to the relationship and long-term brand building, it's really being able to have that level of collaboration and trust between your agency and your client, your brand team, to be able to have those conversations as things evolve, because it happens so fast. And if we were always responding to the things that were happening, it would damage our long-term brand equity, because we'd be all over the place. You see this happening right now with huge brands who have completely shifted their value propositions on a big scale that is having a rippling effect, in the stock market, right? So consumers are savvy. They pay attention. They look for wishy-washy brands who aren't standing on their principles. So, again, moderation, pause. When Alyssa, my business partner, and I started this, our whole kind of mantra was slow and steady wins the race. Do not be reactive. Make very informed decisions that will help, our work, our growth, all of that. So
Yeah, it's a marathon, not a sprint, right?
yes,
It's the
unless
other,
you're working with me on a brainstorm, then it might be short sprints.
Oh, you see me in the sprints, yeah.
Yeah, I did that. Yeah.
Definitely. I'm actually then curious. I mean, because you are brand and new collective, right? Do you think that this kind of puts you ahead of the pack when it comes to retaining creative talent and obviously ensuring that your long-term client relationships are always solid? Because I can just see this happening with everything that you're explaining right now, completely understanding just like your values and just your mission and just where you are at and how you respect the relationships that you all have with clients, but you also respect the relationships that you have with your peers within brand and new collective as well. Would you say so? That it does set
Absolutely.
you-
I
put
mean,
you
I
ahead?
think that's been one of the most exciting parts about building this company, because
Yeah.
coming from a lot of corporate environments, you learn a lot there, a lot of foundational practices. You know, a lot of my like classic training was there, understanding how different teams are structured and working together, but it's also very process driven. There's tons of red tape. It's very hard to be effective and see your work sometimes pay off. Conversely, I've been on the other side in a non-corporate environment that was kind of like working in the Wild Wild West. And I was like, oh my gosh, how are we surviving here? This is chaos. So if you can't tell, I'm a Libra and I like really thrive in balance. I like do not do extremes well. I'm like, I need to live in a middle ground. So when we were building our culture, that was so important, you know, and I'm a mom of 3. It's important for me to be able to build a business, feel so excited and energized about the work that we're doing, but also to prioritize my family and take the time and not be penalized for that and be celebrated for that. And we've been able to, in this like small but mighty team, be super effective with award-winning work while also celebrating the people that work there. But I will tell you, it takes a certain type of grit and mentality to work for Brand New. Like, we are all high performing individuals separate of this agency. And that is like a requirement for the type of success and the work that we have, because we're all dialed in at such a high level. I can't teach that, right? So the same energy that we have in our agency for that is the same energy I bring into my household. And that relationship, that culture, I think builds into retention. It builds into people who are excited by it. They feel like they see the contributions of their work pay off. You know, they're touching it, they're executing, they're a part of everything. And, you know, Alyssa and I and Sophie, we're not precious to say like there's this ivory tower of behavior and I'm over here as a co-founder. I'm right in it with them every day. And I want to be in it with them. Like, I'm excited by that. I mean, I also think it helps to inspire the teams, right? And inspire that type of work ethic. So yeah, I think that's been a very like productive and successful mindset for us to have as an agency that is really like cascaded into just our team dynamic and also our client partnerships.
So I'm then curious because, like, if I am, you know, especially for our DesignRush audience, if I'm, for example, somebody who's just starting out as an agency, or maybe I'm looking at trying to change things a little bit, would you then say that what you've implemented as a growth strategy is something that should just be applied within all these spaces, or is it a kind of like a unique, you know, custom scenario where if you have a specific type of agency here, this is perhaps for you, but maybe not for someone else or some other agency? Yeah.
Yeah, you know, I think our growth strategy has really been slow and steady. I think it's more about sustainability versus like just growth to grow. Because like, what are we growing to achieve? What does that mean, right? Do I feel validated in like the total number of full-time employees I have? Is it about just top line revenue, the number of clients that I have across different industries, awards? Like, what does that actually mean? But before I can kind of get to all of that, we've got to build a sustainable model. And once you sustain, then you add a little bit. Then you keep going. We just talked about a marathon. You train by adding miles on your runs. Sometimes you have long runs. Sometimes you're doing a 3-mile run. On weekends, you might do 8 to 10. But you're building endurance. And I see a lot of the industry who has a very different mindset. their method and metrics of success are very different than our values. I'd rather go slow and get it right than just ball out because I can. I remember my uncle said to me when I got my first job, it was at Motorola out of college. I was 21 and I wanted to buy a car. I needed to buy a car. And I was like, I'm going to buy a C-Class Mercedes. And he said, you are making $35,000 base. What are you doing? This is like the year 2004. Starting salaries are a little different now. But he said, you have to crawl before you walk and you have to walk before you run. And at the time, I was just like, oh, that's such an annoying piece of sage advice. And I ended up getting a great Ford Focus that was literally like a fraction of the, but it's something that stuck with me like throughout my entire career is really being able to like do the base work and then you add and then you do another base and then you add. And I think that is really part of our growth strategy. We're 7 years in almost. I am so proud of our growth. And we have done it on our own and on our own terms with no outside influence. That is a testament, right? So, you take the little wins and then you just move with caution because the other piece of that, I take very seriously the people that work for us. It is a huge responsibility to have someone trust me to like hire them and employ them and create this experience for them. I don't look at that as another number. I don't look at that as like just a target to be like, I want, 50 people in the agency just because. It is, these are people. These are like an extension of our family. And when you look at people like that and you respect people like that, it causes you to work different and show up different.
Yeah, I will say that's what works for us. And I very much respect that sustainability because to Kellie's point, it's people's livelihoods. Right. And you see it even with huge shops right now, just layoffs after layoffs after layoffs. And look, they're inevitable sometimes and they happen and it's part of our industry. But just, sustainability means that and the way that Kellie has and Alyssa have purposely grown means that, we're not as susceptible to outside external influences. But then again, look, we don't tell... Bit of sage advice from my mum, don't go to other people's houses and tell them how to clean it, So what works for us may not work for you, and that's okay.
Would you then say that the way that you all have approached your brand, your agency, the way that you work together is actually also part of like this sharper edge that you have? If you were to look at like your competitors or just even just your
softer
peers,
edge that we have. It's our soft edge.
In terms of my next question, I want to go a little bit into metrics, okay? A lot of agencies, track revenue and your client count as signs of success. But what would you say are these specific metrics that actually show whether an agency is growing in a healthy, strategic way?
I think client retention. Because if you are growing too fast, everyone feels it. You feel it, your team feels it, your clients feel it. And, the number one key to healthy growth is keeping the clients that you have in your house because it costs to pitch. It costs, there's a human cost, there's a financial cost. So, when you don't retain clients, there are many, many, many costs to that you just have to factor in. So I think back to sustainability, at Brand New, we've had the same clients from founding and we've grown those client relationships. There can be no better measurement of success in my mind as a head of client service.
That's so true. It's so true. It's like, obviously financials are so important and understanding the quantitative aspect of how your business runs is, foundationally critical. But Sophie is 100% correct. Like our relationships that we have developed, maintained, kept, nurtured across all of these years is a huge factor and indicator of our success. And also when your clients are excited to work with you, they're excited and they give you that feedback to say, we can't wait to work with you because we know we get this from you. That kind of validation and, just communication is very important, because coming from the brand side, you are sleeping, eating, thinking about these brands all the time. Like, it is literally like you're running your own business with someone else's money, of course, as a brand marketer. So, to be able to find those agency partners and those supplier partners where it feels like they see you, they get you, they're on the same journey with you, is huge. And because it's not constant, it's not a given, right? And I think that is such a unique aspect of what we bring to the table, is really that kind of like team captain partnership, where it just feels like we're all in the trenches together, going for the same vision.
Speaking about the trenches, I mean, has there ever been a time where you felt like it's time you need to just step back and reassess, your growth or your strategies, your way forward, because actually going the other way, I mean, as Sophie was mentioning earlier, there's like a whole lot of things that goes into this financial, aspect. There's the human aspect, the time, the money, the energy, all of that.
Yeah. I mean, I think life is a series of resets. And if you're not doing that, then that's to your own detriment. When you grow, the goalposts change. Like, you have to continuously come to the table, challenge yourself. And that's not just on an annual basis. That's just self-awareness to be like, that could happen at any moment. So there's been multiple parts of our journey where we've had to take a step back and say, like, okay, let's reset, like recalibrate. Are we still on the same mission? What do we need to do to deliver X, Y, Z? How do we bring in additional partners who are subject matter experts in certain pieces of like the operations side of our business that can drive efficiency and better utility here? So that's constant. I think when, you're also growing, you are trying to answer questions to say, like, what do I want to grow into? We've done this really well for this amount of time, which is great. So that's like maybe a foundation. And then as we build, we're saying, where do we want to focus our energy? And what does that look like? Because if you don't do that, it's really hard to be effective, because you start to want to do everything. Your to-do list would be 30, 50, bullet points. So it's like really focusing in on like 3 to 5 strategic priorities, or whatever makes sense for you and your company at that time, and say, this is what we're going to focus on. We just did that a couple of months ago, through a series of workshops. Sophie and I would sit there with Alyssa, and we'd really be thinking like about our strategic growth and saying, where do we want to focus? It's not that there aren't a ton of things we'd like to do, but I don't ever want anybody, at Brand New to be in a position where we just say like yes to everything. Yes doesn't get you excellence, right? Like, you have to be discerning, because if you don't put in the quality of work and that if you don't have the capacity, you can't give that A+ effort. And then you have mediocre work, which does not lead to what Sophie said, client retention.
It's like I can actually picture this like, building that is just having things added onto it as you're busy describing it. So like getting that whole visual storytelling side of it. So what I want to find out is, when trying to land major accounts, what would you say is the biggest difference between agencies that win and agencies that don't? Like when it's not price. You were chatting earlier about the human factor, but maybe you could expand and just really unpack this a little bit more. That'd be great.
I think that's great, because it is about the human factor, because ultimately, yes, cost matters. Yes, the creative matters. That's table stakes. Another thing I think is table stakes is, again, about humanity. You spend more time with your clients and your family. So same goes for them. They want to know who they're working with. They want to know the types of people they're working with. Are you going to be a partner to them? So it's, are you likable? But also, how are you going to be at 2 a.m. in the morning on a production? How are you going to be, how are you going to be during those hard times? Because, there are challenges that come up. So I think even in a pitch, Kellie mentioned proactive listening. So that's something they're looking out for. And actually, I've been at other places where we've lost pitches, and I always ask for feedback. And they go, you spoke over us. And you're going, and they said, your work was amazing, but we don't want to work like that. it's at the end of the day, we're working with humans, and humans want to work with people they want to work with. So I think that's often overlooked.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I also feel like the other piece is just a confidence that your partners know what they're talking about. I think that across a variety of industries, you've got a lot of, people sometimes that hide behind things or have like mediocre type of, expertise. And when you're doing client agency work, it's very visible, right? It's very transparent. And you want to make sure that you are working with people who really understand what you're doing and asking, because, that fake it till you make it piece can only take you so far, right? And I think that when it starts to impact the work, it causes problems, long-term problems for the relationship and the dynamic, et cetera. So, I think that there's just a lot of value in that interconnectivity between, as Sophie's saying, how people work and how your character is, how informed you are, how strategic you are as a thinker. Can you be a partner alongside them? And those things are very easily identified once you start getting into the work.
I'm so glad that you're actually pointing out those questions to ask, because that was actually something that I wanted to ask you. One of the questions that agencies should ask themselves before they're pitching. So from your time working with brand side clients, what would you say separates a high performing agency relationship from one that looks good in the pitch deck, but like falls flat in execution?
Yeah. Gosh, that happens so often. I think anybody can make something look pretty. We talk about AI. You could probably put a pitch deck through an AI tool and zhuzh it up and make a beautiful presentation. There's no shortage of ideas. You can be creative all day. But I think, there are a couple of lenses that you have to look at things through. One is like, does anyone really care? Is what you're saying and pitching and producing, is it actually answering the question? Is it answering the brief? Are you going through that lens to really like dig into the business challenge? So that's like one piece. I think the other piece is, there's this habit that exists where what's that saying? It's like jack of all trades, master of none, but oftentimes better than master of one. It's like you've got these partners who were like, we do everything. Yes, yes, yes. Going back to saying yes. And when you say yes all of the time, it's really hard to execute because you actually can't execute A+ across everything. So how do you get into a situation where you can really be focused as an agency, being very intentional with how we're positioned, very focused on what we deliver, very focused on our lens, and stay in our lane? That doesn't mean we can't be collaborative. It just means that we're focused in this area so we can deliver top tier A+ work to you. And, when you kind of go through with this jack of all trades mentality, you can pitch all the beautiful things in the world, but operationally it falls flat. And then you're burning money, burning cash because you got to fix it. You got to bring in someone else to fix the mess. It's not good. Right? So we know these things to be true. And because we know these things to be true, how do we, as an agency, as a partner, get ahead of those things to try to identify what is the best structure here so that we can prevent these things we know to be true? I think something that we hold very high at Brand New is operational excellence. Our ability to execute is everything. Whatever happens behind the scenes, there's always a pivot. There's always something that does not go according to plan. It might rain when it's supposed to be sunny. Like, you got to go with the flow. You've got to be solutions oriented because the execution is so important. And when you bring the clients along, when you bring them through the journey of those pivots, they understand it, because they're a part of it. But I really think it's like, being aware of what's your expertise, what can you be a master of? And that's not to say you don't have versatility. You should have versatility. But I think that that's been something that's a challenge as a small business. I'm sure a lot of small businesses face those challenges, right? So when you're able to have that mindset of slow and steady, when you're able to have that mindset of proof of concept, and you just start to get in, and then you start to show up and show out your work, people are like, wait a minute, I like that. And then that grows and it builds. And next thing you know, you're a key partner. And that level of like flexibility and nimbleness that we can have as an agency, that allows us to do that, where a lot of the other major agencies wouldn't be able to have that flexibility. So, it's all in kind of how you look at things.
Our name is so important in such a small industry. Word of mouth is so important. We're not going to shoot ourselves in the foot pretending we have expertise in an area that we don't. We have expertise in enough areas. So, we've been very honest with that. Sometimes when we see opportunities hit our table, is this the best opportunity for us, and is this the best opportunity for the client? And they respect that.
But I mean, some agencies do that, and the jack of all trades thing that you're also talking about, Kellie, don't you think there's also then just a risk that if you're trying to be a jack of all trades and you're pushing, the staff, like, on, you have to do everything, and it's like you've got like 500 things to do that's on a checklist for a client, people burn out, right? I mean, they burn out and then you wouldn't get the quality of work that you want in the first place, and it will all fall flat again.
100%. But I think it's a bigger, intricate challenge, right? Because there are a ton of benefits that I could see as a brand, as a company that's, a large brand that would benefit from working with a major agency, right? That has, this kind of like omni-channel expertise. And it's not to say that those aren't the right decisions in certain areas, right? Like, we make sense for certain types of work. I don't have a land grab mentality where I'm just trying to take everything just because. I want to be able to focus on the things that we are really good at. And, the piece of this is that it's all about like a pressure cooker almost, right? Because if you keep making the same mistake and you keep just, pushing this route that's not working, at some point, the shoe will drop, right? And that's going to show up in the work. It might show up in like the dynamic and the relationship. So I think it's very important for all companies, regardless of your size, don't get so comfortable. You shouldn't ever be comfortable to be like, I've got this in the bag. You should always be showing up, giving your best effort to put your A game in, whether you're a team of 15 or 1,500, because let the right kind of market condition happen, or a management changeover happen, or some dynamic shift. And somebody could just come in and be like, I want to try something different. I don't think this is working. But you've been showing up as a B or C partner for me. So that validates that, right? So for us, it's like always A+ game. That does not mean we win all the time, and that's okay. But the mentality that we have is like, if we put in our A+ effort here and we don't get it, we didn't leave anything on the table. I'm okay with that. That's the same lesson I talk to my kids about even. It's like I hold myself to the same like level of account though. It's like, I'm not mad if you come home with a C on a math test. If you studied and you know that you paid attention and you really tried and this is your best effort, that's okay. But when we leave stuff on the table and we don't show up for ourselves, that's the issue. So all of that to say, there's enough room for people. There's enough seats at the table for so many people to play at really well. And I think when our partners can understand the right dynamic and the balance of who those partners are to bring them their best work, that's when you get the best output, right?
What I will say is no one at our company or in Kellie's house comes home with a C.
It's few and far between. But, when you have high expectations for yourself, you'd be surprised what you can accomplish. Listen, that's the mindset aspect of it. Yeah. It is not always about winning. It is about having a winning mindset. And you can't win if you don't practice and show up and put your best effort. And, I think it's just such an amazing way to work. I think if we are spending so much of our lives in these work environments, you should be excited and passionate about the work that you're doing. You should be showing up with intention and purpose in all aspects of that, and that's not to say we don't rest and we don't have, time where, we get to recalibrate, because we do. But when we show up, we really want our partners to understand that we're showing up with our best selves for them all the time.
So my last question to the both of you, and this is taking a look at, just candid conversations with another agency leader. So if you could have that kind of conversation with another agency leader about staying distinct while scaling, who would it be and what would you want to ask them?
So I would say that there are a variety of people in the kind of like professional orbit that I like very respect and kind of like follow their careers a bit. I don't know that I would talk to another agency leader, but I would talk to another kind of entrepreneur that I feel like has had a transformative career, Imagreed. So Imagreed is, just incredibly aspirational. And I think when you hear about her story as one of 4 daughters, like very modest upbringing, and she was told by her mother very young that she was not better than anyone, but no one was better than her. And it really fueled her to just be herself and pursue and be great at what she wanted, and to like evolve herself and pursue her dreams. And it's obviously manifested into this amazing kind of multi-mogul career of a huge iconic brands that are like around us right now. And I think, when you talk about growth and, how to scale and maintain relationships, you look at, what she's created with, Good American or Skims, or even some of her other kind of, community work. And it's been very intentional kind of scaling of how she's grown these brands over time, with the right partnerships, the right moments in culture to capitalize on. And I think that, if I could sit with her and ask her, something like very pivotal, it's like, how did you keep yourself locked in at those big inflection points? Because growth can be scary sometimes. When you are leading the pack, every time you grow, it takes a bit more from you. And people used to say this adage when we were growing up, which is totally not real. It's like, as you ascend in your kind of professional life, you have like less and less responsibility. That's like not true at all. That's fake news. It's more responsibility, but for different reasons, right? And I think when you scale and you're growing, how do you keep yourself really balanced and check yourself to be able to still show up in the way you want to while continuing to just expand, and I think a lot of it probably has to do with delegation. I think it has to do with like strong, small teams around you that are highly efficient, because you can't be everything for everybody. But I mean, what I wouldn't give to have coffee with that woman, and also just learn how she does her tablescapes, because chef's kiss.
Honestly, it's how you, just any leader, how you handle mistakes. Because I think we all know how to handle wins. Handling wins is easier than handling your mistakes. So when you make a mistake, because that is inevitable, my question to people that I always respect and mentors is, how do you handle those moments, those mistakes? Because I think that really defines you as a leader. It's very, very easy to lead when the going is good. So to me, that's the question I always ask anyone who, I admire. And your team doesn't forget how you act in those moments.
Ladies, you are just absolutely amazing. I could talk for hours and hours if you let me. But our time has come to an end right now. I just want to say thank you so much for joining us on the DesignRush podcast. I absolutely loved all the insightful conversation, the knowledge that you're sharing here, your expertise, but it's also very admirable for me as a woman to see other women do this. And I just think it's absolutely wonderful. So thank you so much for joining me right here on the DesignRush podcast. And I will be keeping an eye on you to see what other amazing spaces you'll be in the future. Thank you
so much. Our absolute pleasure.
It's been a pleasure.
Curious about what top brands look for when choosing an agency? Tune into our latest episodes where we reveal the decision-making secrets of leading brands. Subscribe to the DesignRush podcast and stay ahead of the competition.